Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webcast today. My name is Irene Gallia, and I'm a business reporter here at the Globe and Mail. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the Globe and Mail is headquartered on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis Nation, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. By now, business leaders across Canada are increasingly aware of aligning their business with their corporate purpose. Many already have programs to drive sustainability and social impact and community growth. Businesses with more established programs may even be looking at putting their corporate purpose at the core of everything they do. Today, I'll be speaking with business leaders who are either beginning to turn their attention to corporate purpose or have been actively working in this space for several years. We aren't anticipating any technical issues, but we appreciate your when you rise. And if you need any technical help, please click on the help desk icon at the bottom of your screen. During the last 10 minutes of this panel, we'll be answering your questions. So please, if you have any questions for our panelists, type them into the Q&A box. And on behalf of the Globe and Mail, I would like to recognize Coast Capital for supporting today's event. So let's get started. The concept of corporate purpose isn't new, but the idea of an economy built around sustainability and social impact is just starting to gain ground in Canada. Joining me for a discussion on what corporate purpose is and what it means for businesses is Coro Strandberg, co-founder and chair of the Canadian Purpose Economy Project. Your organization's vision, Coro, is that by 2030, at least 25%, so 1/4 of Canadian businesses are adopting and disclosing and authentically embedding a social purpose across their organizations. I'd like to hear more about that goal, but to begin with, can you tell us how you got involved in this space and a bit more about what you're doing day to day now?
Thank you very much, Irene. Glad to be in discussion here with you today. I have over 30 years experience in Canada, advising businesses, governments, and associations, initially on corporate social responsibility, then on sustainability, and then on environment social governance, which goes by ESG these days. And then a few years ago, I started to advise businesses on social purpose. That brought me into relationship with the United Way BC, who asked me to help them set up the Social Purpose Institute. And from that, a group of marvelous humans came together out of that initiative to create the Canadian Purpose Economy Project, which has the vision that you outlined. And basically what we're trying to do there, and what I'm doing there, is working on creating an enabling environment by which social purpose businesses are helped to start, transition, thrive, and grow to the point that social purpose becomes mainstream in business. And we use that number 25% you referred to earlier because that's the point at which we believe will create a tipping point, by which point social purpose will become the norm in Canada. And we have identified 10 levers of change that we're working on. And this is how my work is focused these days to create this enabling environment. I'll just mention one or two. We're working with a group of investors, giving them guidance on how they can start to talk to their companies that they're invested in and their funds on how they're on what is the purpose of the company that they're invested in and directed their capital towards. So we're providing guidance to investors on that. We're also working on creating educational guidelines for boards of directors of social purpose companies, so that boards know how they could actually have oversight of that purpose. And we're also working to mobilize associations across Canada to identify them and then to support them so that they can start to introduce social purpose to their membership. And yesterday, we launched the CEO Call to Purpose, and we have nearly 80 CEOs of Canadian social purpose companies who are basically calling out to their peers and colleagues, other CEOs, that they too consider adopting a social purpose as the reason they exist.
Why don't we step back a bit? I think some of our audience members will know what we're talking about here, but for some it might be new. So what is a purpose-driven organization? What does it mean to be purpose-driven?
Yeah, so a purpose-driven organization, or let's say a social purpose business, is a business whose reason for being is to create a better world. That social purpose business seeks to profitably solve the problems of people and planet and not create harm in doing so. So that business then with their social purpose brings all of their assets, all of their resources, their relationships, their influence, reach, and scale to help society address its challenges as defined by the social purpose that they have chosen. Now, we use the language of social purpose business. It could be an environmental purpose, it could be a social purpose, but it's in any case a purpose to contribute to addressing challenges that society faces. I'll give you a couple of examples of an environmental purpose, perhaps Hemlock Printers Company, SME type smaller organization operating in the Pacific Northwest. They are a printing company and they have a purpose to help conserve the world's forests. So a very ambitious, audacious purpose. Another couple of examples, Maple Leaf Foods. It has a purpose to raise the good in food. And it has also adopted a long-term vision to be the most sustainable protein company in the world. Then we have, TELUS. Many would know TELUS. They have a purpose, roughly speaking, which is to leverage their technology to enable social change and remarkable human outcomes.
Right. So
There's
I'm
even
curious.
a mergers and one more. There's even a mergers and acquisitions firm, an M&A firm, who's adopted a social purpose, Baker Tilly Corporate Finance, to help businesses in transition unlock their social and economic potential. Mm-hmm.
A wide range of potential social purposes. So I've heard some describe having a social purpose as putting that purpose even before profit, and I think that might be a concept that might surprise some people. It goes against how we have traditionally thought of business. Is that how you see social purpose?
Well, what we find in practice is there's sort of two philosophies at play here, adopted by boards and owners and executives of companies. Two philosophies of around profit. For some social purpose business, their purpose transcends profit, the type you were speaking of. And for other social purpose businesses, their purpose is the route to profit. So we find these two types of operating logics, I guess, in practice today.
Mhm. Route to profit, as in they're using this by stating their social purpose, arranging their business. They're using that to improve and grow profit.
Yes.
Right? Do we have evidence currently that um, that stating and organizing around a social purpose actually does help your bottom line?
Well, my inbox is flooded with research being conducted to really try to understand your question and to prove out the value proposition for this pivot. So the kind of research that is most common is showing that employees prefer to work for businesses that have a social purpose. It's now become a factor in the recruitment process. So businesses with a social purpose will say, and the evidence shows, over 2/3 of employees prefer to work for these kind of companies. This is Edelman research. And not only do they prefer to work for them, but they stay with them and they're more productive and more engaged. You can see that. Also, we're seeing that social purpose companies, 2/3 of customers would prefer to shop and be loyal with and promote and amplify the brands of businesses that have a social purpose. There's another really important stat from Edelman that's Canadian that I think is really revealing is almost 3/4 of Canadian consumers want to see the businesses that they buy from to really help society address its problems, to be innovators, to be collaborators. Customers are looking for this evidence. We also find in the business case research that CEOs say that having a social purpose gives them strategic focus. And this is why investors are so enamored of purpose-driven firms, is because of this strategic focus that will help the business navigate through turbulent times, to pivot instantly. All employees from the top to the shop floor understand what your purpose is, and so you can make more rapid decisions. You can get alignment in the company. It fosters agility, and it's these kinds of values in a business that investors believe will put that business on a course for long-term profitability.
So
Basically,
what does
one
this
more, so I just have to add one more point about what we're seeing is that if stakeholders want a business to be successful, your company can't be beat. If your stakeholders want you to win, you can't be beat.
right? So what does this mean practically for a business aside from putting up a statement on their about page, right?
Yeah.
What are the deep level changes that have to happen at an organization to really for them to really be able to say they're a social purpose organization?
Yeah, well, this is why we talk about in our vision statement to embed it authentically, to implement it authentically. We've seen a rapid rise of businesses adopting a social purpose, and then we go right away to their annual report to see if they're disclosing on their purpose. So what we believe that businesses need to do to fully embrace their purpose, to live, realize, and achieve their purpose, is they need to embed it in everything they do. So once you've adopted a social purpose, then the real work begins, if you will. This is like business model transformation in effect, where what you're doing is first you would, if you have a board, you would adopt in the board's charter that the board has oversight of the purpose. And so now there's regular routine board oversight. And then the CEO and team would put the social purpose into the corporate strategy. It wasn't there before. Now you would have some metrics, both to generate impact against your purpose to solve the societal problem you've identified yourself, but also metrics around how you're embedding your purpose. So two types of metrics in
Disclosure.
strategy. Sorry?
Okay. Disclosure of how the company is following up on um, their commitments, how they're following their social purpose. Um, and
I
then
must get at two other points. It needs to be embedded in the culture. It needs to be embedded in the products and performance management in the organization. So I just wanted to get those additional points off, but yeah. Mhm.
how is it embedded in the products?
What we find leaders doing is once they've adopted their social purpose, then they conduct a product portfolio review or something like that, where they look to see how their products are enabling their purpose. Maybe they might be contra their purpose, in which case they'll have a plan to transition out of those products. And then they, more importantly, look to see how their products can be a driver of their purpose and double down on the purpose. And that leads to product innovation. And one example of product innovation I just have in mind, again, is another TELUS example, but their CEO and his team, basically having adopted a social purpose, then opened up new lines of products for the company, one being a tech agriculture, and that is using the data of this technology company, for example, to help businesses reduce their food waste. That's just one example of what TELUS has done, just a new example of a new product that's driving new growth for the organization. So that's what a social purpose does, is basically drives innovation into the business. So now it's a new lens on the work.
So we'll open to the broader panel in just a minute. I just want to ask one more question, Coro. When we were talking, you mentioned a term that I hadn't heard before, which is purpose washing. And I think when we're talking about a subject like social purpose or ESG, it's important to be critical. And you've already mentioned this in ensuring that companies are disclosing and calculating metrics and sharing that. But can you tell me about what purpose washing is and how you see that as a challenge?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a challenge. Purpose washing is, of course, where businesses adopt a purpose but aren't authentically implementing it or collaborating with others to achieve it. And so we're at risk in Canada of purpose washing and even globally, which is why the Canadian Purpose Economy Project is working to create the enabling conditions to help businesses understand how to actually effectively implement their social purpose. And this is the route to avoid purpose washing, is to make sure that that businesses have the guidance they need to embed it in strategy and culture and capital allocation, risk, etc. It changes all the functions in the business and all professional roles and all roles in a firm, and businesses need to double down on that. And so this is something that we have really see as being essential as the next step. The Canadian Purpose Economy Project next year early will be releasing a report on the state of purpose governance in Canada, where we have found that from this survey of directors, members, we found that about 50% believe that their companies actually have a social purpose is the reason they exist. We're well on the way to our target, but are they implementing it? Are they governing it? And unfortunately, business schools are not yet teaching it. Corporate Nice, in partnership with with our project, has just released a study, a global study of business schools, looking to see if at the MBA level they were starting to actually teach social purpose in business, the purpose first business model in contrast to the profit first business model. Are they teaching both models to students? And unfortunately, none are, save for two we found in Europe, I think, somewhere. So this is why we need business schools to be teaching it. We need associations to be orienting and educating their members to it, because businesses look to their associations for this kind of information. And we need business leaders to look to their peers, to learn from their peers, to see what strategies their peers are taking on, to see how they can adopt and replicate it.
Right. And we will now hear from some of those business leaders. So thank you so much, Coro. Coro will be rejoining us at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions for Coro, please put them in the Q&A box now, or throughout the conversation. We will be returning to those. So I'd now like to introduce our panelists. So joining us today are Maureen Young, Vice President of Social Purpose at Coast Capital, Liz Macbeth, CEO of Armor Valve, Christelle Francois, Chair for the Table of Impact Investment Practitioners and Board Chair at Bowen Social Impact, and David Redfern, President and CEO of Lafarge for Eastern Canada. Thank you all for joining us. So I think to start, I'll ask each of you just to introduce yourself and just tell us how your role intersects with social purpose. Why don't we start with Maureen?
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Irene, and hello, everyone. I'm the Vice President of Social Purpose at Coast Capital. We are a credit union and a certified B Corp based in British Columbia. We've got about 600,000 member owners and just under 2,000 employees. We were approved to become a federal credit union a few years ago, where previously we were limited to operating in BC. And as we look to build a new corporate strategy to support our next chapter, we decided to adopt a social purpose business model. So for the past 3 years, I've been leading the implementation of purpose at Coast Capital. And maybe I'll just end my intro to state my purpose, or our purpose, which takes aim at growing income inequality in our communities and is to build better futures together with a vision of unlocking financial opportunities to positively impact people and communities.
Hi, I guess I'm next. I'm the president and second generation in my family business, as well as the chair of Family Enterprise Canada's Sustainability Initiative. And we are introducing purpose to that community as well. So Armor Valve is an equipment supplier to Canadian energy and industry. We recently defined our social purpose, which is to transform infrastructure for a healthy, thriving planet. Our clients have an important role to play in society, essentially keeping our homes warm and the lights on. And that society is increasingly demanding that they do this in a way that ensures the well-being of people and planet for future generations. So they're transitioning to cleaner technologies and more circular processes, and we're supporting them through that transition. What's exciting about working with Family Enterprise Canada is the potential impact that that sector can have in advancing the purpose economy, because family enterprises exist in every sector of our economy and every province and territory. So collectively, that community has the potential to be a powerful force for good. And we already tend to focus on value creation for future generations because of our ownership model. Thank you.
And you've told us that you're advocating for social purpose among other companies, which is great.
Yes, through that association of family enterprises.
Right. Christelle, why don't you tell us a bit about your work?
Absolutely. So first off, thank you so much for having me today. So as mentioned, I'm currently the board chair for 2 organizations, one of them being the Table of Impact Investment Practitioners, which is essentially is the community of practice of social finance intermediaries across Canada, meaning we represent different impact funds across the country, and it's a membership-based organization, and these impact funds invest in social purpose organizations. And so in addition to that, I'm also the board chair for BOAN Social Impact. And BOAN Social Impact is actually one of the 3 wholesalers from the Federal Social Finance Fund, which is a $755 million fund. And so we are one of the 3 fund managers for that. And through our mission, we invest in social purpose focused funds that then in turn are able to support other social purpose organizations. And so through these 2 organizations, really working at the intersection of finance, impact investing, but also looking at social purpose as truly the core intersection piece for these 3 various themes.
And we will come back to what you look for when you're investing. David, can you tell us a bit about your organization?
Sure. I'm Dave Redfern. I'm the CEO of Lafarge in Eastern Canada. We're a supplier of construction material solutions, so cement, ready mix, aggregate, asphalt. So we really are at the center of the sustainability question now. We extract minerals, we use resources. CO2 is, cement is a major producer of CO2. So really, purpose is absolutely critical to defining our North Star and defining our strategy. So our purpose is building progress for people and planet. But really, one of the key pieces is how this links with our entire architecture of our business, with our vision, our mission, our values. And as CEO, this really defines who we are, where we're going, and how we get there. So absolutely central to my role.
Right. So when we were talking before this, several of you who have undergone a business change by stating and recognizing your social purpose said that the first challenge was deciding how to define it. That was a challenge. Perhaps Maureen or Liz, could you speak to why defining your purpose was a challenge?
Sure. Shall I go first? So, purpose, it's not a project or a tool, as Cora's described. It's something much more fundamental. It really expresses that reason for being, why you exist, why you show up every day. And at first glance, it may seem obvious what your purpose is. For example, to produce the best product. And so you have to keep asking yourself, why? Why are we producing the best product? And as you keep asking that question, you start to really uncover the impact that you're trying to have. And so I think also taking that time to look back at where the company has come from, how it's evolved, its values, all the things that have been the greatest strengths and the unique capabilities that you offer. So those are some of the kinds of things that we underwent as we looked to define our purpose. And beyond looking at what we do ourselves uniquely well, you also need to look at what's needed, out there in the world, in your markets that you're trying to impact. You got to do research, you have to do consultations on the challenges and the issues and the pain points that you're serving and hope to serve. And it's really in the intersection of those 2 things where you find your purpose. And so I think my big takeaway on this question would be that it is a process that takes time. It's not something that you can just bolt on to your same old way of doing business. And if you can land that strong purpose statement that can endure for the long term, it really creates value because it's meaningful and it's relevant to those that you're aiming to serve. And that's your customers, in our case, our members, of course, but also our employees and more broadly into the community, so that you can really drive that broader societal impact. That's so key to a social purpose.
Liz, I do want to come to you next, but Maureen, maybe you could just tell us, what is the biggest change at your organization since defining your purpose? What is the most fundamental change that you've actually made so far?
Well, I mean, I think it is in how we are executing. So, where we were definitely driving impact through our philanthropic programs, through our sustainability efforts, were B Corp, obviously. So, making an impact and being, a strong member of the community was a really important part of who we were as an organization. This is a real evolution, quite a natural evolution for us as a cooperative, a very values-based organization. But now it's about really intentionally building purpose into all the different aspects of what we do. So through our policies and practices, and our, looking at all of our different programs, et cetera. So it's a much more integrated approach.
Liz, so you are at the head of a family business that's been running for 50 years, I believe, at least. Redefining your business around a social purpose doesn't happen overnight. And for a business that's been around for 50 years, you have established ways of doing business, established partners. Can you tell us about what you've been facing, and the challenges that you've been coming across as you shift your organization through a social purpose lens?
So I want to echo what Maureen said. Defining a purpose takes time and patience and a lot of communication and listening. And it's high stakes. The purpose has to be authentic to your business. It has to authentically describe the social need that you exist to fulfill. It's aspirational. It needs to inspire and engage internal and external stakeholders. So it's not a simple process to discover it and fine-tune the statement. In our case, some of the challenges that we experienced did have to do with being an established business with perhaps entrenched modes of thinking. So there was a long awareness raising and a long process of communicating, listening to employees, customers, stakeholders, to really understand the reason that we exist. And in our case, it's to transform infrastructure for a healthy, thriving planet. And that means that industry has its place, but the expectation is for more holistic sense of responsibility towards people and planet.
Right.
Yeah. And we're right now at the purpose, right now in the process, sorry, of using our purpose to guide decision-making throughout the company and introducing it into our KPIs and policies and procedures. And we're starting to measure our performance around purpose. So some of the purpose metrics that we're introducing have to do with employee engagement around our purpose, and also the product piece that Coro spoke about. So the % of products that fit our purpose, just to help our customers get to net zero.
Yeah, and as a leader of a business, how do you manage the pull between social purpose and profit? How do you make those decisions?
Well, we need to be profitable in order to pursue our purpose. And I'm not sure which of the logic models that Coro spoke of we're going to end up embracing, but both are necessary. And some of the benefits that I've experienced in the last year since discovering our purpose and now starting to embed it are like a real sense of rallying around the purpose among our employees that's strengthened our team cohesion in a way that's very positive.
Christelle, you do impact investing. Can you tell us, for the audience members, what is impact investing, and what do you look for in a company that you are impact investing in?
Absolutely. So when you're looking at impact investing, essentially what it is you're investing. So as an investor, traditionally, the goal is to have financial returns, and that's the main objective. But with impact investing, you're observing financial returns, but also returns that are beneficial from a societal, environmental, and equitable perspective. And so you're looking at these types of investments that also have these other contributions to our world. And so we're seeing more and more different, even private equity companies creating these blended products that provide the opportunity for investors to be able to invest in these types of opportunities, to have these types of returns. And it's really also to give the chance to an investor the opportunity to invest in different products or companies that align with their values. To Cora's point earlier, we're seeing more and more, not only through employees, but shareholders, investors looking to participate in economic opportunities that align with their values. And so for us, when we're looking at different social purpose organizations to invest in, or if it's a company, of course, we're looking at, profitability. This is still business, right? But we're looking at what is their social purpose and how is that integrated through and weaved out through the structure and framework of that company. And so we're looking at, are they measuring how the reporting on the metrics in terms of how they're actually achieving their social purpose. We're looking at what are some of the policies within the organization to, again, match with the social purpose. So it's really looking at, is it profitable and has business sense, but more importantly, how is that social purpose demonstrated, and what are the actual facts and reporting on that in terms of how they're achieving that. So that's where we're looking at, and definitely making sure that there's diversification across the portfolio in terms of sectors and industries, and making sure it's equitable representation as well in terms of the people behind some of these companies and funds.
Right. So making sure that they're disclosing metrics. That's how you're distinguishing between a company that might be truly embodying that purpose and one that might be using it for marketing purposes, for instance.
You got
Is
it.
it,
Exactly.
yeah. Is it easy to tell at this point, or are there dead giveaways on either side?
That's a great question. I mean, it's easy to tell once you begin doing your due diligence, but it's not always so obvious from the onset. Many companies have these great presentation decks, beautiful mission. I mean, it just looks fantastic, but it's once you begin the true due diligence process and you're asking more of these in-depth questions that a lot of this is able to really come to light in terms of how they're actually performing. So for all investors, we're really looking at making sure that due diligence process is done, and it's not just a marketing greenwashing ploy.
What's an example of a metric that you or your team might look to understand how they're implementing that purpose?
Absolutely. So definitely for each type of investment, it varies in terms of which metric we're looking at. But for instance, if it's a clean energy or sustainability type of investment, sometimes their objectives will be, okay, our goal is to reduce carbon emissions by X%, right? And so we'll look at, okay, through these projects or initiatives that they've done, how has that actually been achieved, and what type of what's been the performance of these initiatives that they've been doing to really achieve these specific objectives that they've set. So those are metrics that we will analyze in terms of what the objective is. Also, sometimes it may be that this fund is investing in underrepresented communities. And so if your fund is investing in Indigenous or Black entrepreneurs, and that's your social purpose, we're looking at how many companies have you been able to invest in? What's been the growth of these companies at that scale as well? And so we're looking at really performance-based, but also how true is their investments and what they're claiming to do in relation to what they're actually doing. So these are some of the things that we're looking at when evaluating these various metrics for how much a company or an investment fund is really achieving their objectives.
And David, when we were talking before this, you mentioned that tracking metrics is very important at Lafarge. Could you tell us a bit about what you're tracking and how you're using that to measure success and also make decisions?
Sure. One of the big aha moments when I was introduced to the purpose idea, and I got to admit that I was a little hesitant when first introduced, was when I realized how it could be used to align your entire business architecture. What I mean by business architecture is purpose is the why. Why does a business do something? A vision is where you want to go. A mission is how you get there. The values is what you need to get there. And then the metrics are how you measure success. And one of the biggest piece when we decided to align, have a purpose, was the alignment of all that business architecture. And what that does is it empowers, especially when you're a larger organization, decision-making, effective decision-making, aligned decision-making at a much lower level in the business. It increases speed, innovation, just super powerful. So the metrics we have are first off financial. Businesses have to be profitable. The key piece for us, the key decision is how we can make sustainability profitable. That is the critical choice and decision we have to make. So our key metrics are revenue growth, their EBIT, their free cash flow, their ROIC. Those are the ones, and we've had those for a long time. But now we also measure the key externalities, and those are, as a cement producer, CO2 produced. So we actually measure CO2 per ton of cementitious produced. And I get that every month, where we're at. There's key levers on what we need to do, and it's a key piece of my strategic objective. The other one we measure is waste-derived resources. Right now in Eastern Canada alone, we're using 2.5 million tons of waste-derived resources rather than virgin materials. We look at water usage. We look at how many liters of water we use per ton of cement. And we use a system called the Biodiversity Indicator Reporting System. If anyone's interested, it's called BRRS. Absolutely fantastic system where we can measure in our quarries to see how we're impacting the biodiversity. But the real key piece and the real power of having a purpose is using it to align your entire strategic direction to empower your frontline forces to make those critical decisions in a fast and innovative way.
So has having these metrics measured allowed you to make financial decisions about who you partner with, what sort of products you work with, really fundamentally that affect the bottom line?
Yeah, they're literally at the core of the business. Every month at my month-end review, I'm looking at both these. When I'm looking at capital expenditures, I'm looking at both of these. It's really integrated into who we are. Additionally, for us, especially around the CO2 question, a bunch of people in the market see this as a huge liability for cement producers. We are producing so much CO2. So to attract capital, we have to convince the markets as well that we are serious about this. So, we're very transparent. We have a sustainability report. It's all there. But yeah, these are central to it. And again, it's not to go out and say, we're going to lose money doing it. It has to be done profitably. You could make some short-term decisions that are profit negative, but they have to be mid and long-term about sustaining profitability.
Okay. Liz, you have spent quite a bit of time talking to other family-owned companies about social purpose. What are some of the challenges that you hear from other companies? What are they thinking about? What are they concerned about in this process?
Well, I think there's a major issue, not just for our business, but family enterprise across Canada, because by 2026, 78% of businesses like ours are going to be either preparing for or undergoing transition to a next generation. So many of them won't remain family owned, but for those that want continuity of family ownership, they have this challenge of needing to ignite a passion for the business in the next generation. And that next generation is increasingly craving meaningful work and expecting business to provide value back to society. So I hear often from younger family members in our community that they don't feel a strong connection necessarily to the operating business. They're looking for values alignment and they're not always finding it. So I think the purpose can help foster and strengthen that connection to the business. And as a personal example, without purpose and us striving to have a positive impact in the world, I am 100% sure that my next generation, who currently is only 13 years old, will not engage with our business. And I'll probably have to answer some serious questions if I don't do what I can to make the world better for him and for his future generations.
Right. Okay. Maureen, when we were talking, you mentioned how you have dissolved your corporate responsibility office and opened a social purpose office. Aside from a name change, what does that really mean fundamentally?
Yeah, it was really an important shift for us to be able to signal to our employees. And corporate social responsibility typically sits on the side of the organization and tends to drive impact through your philanthropic efforts, through your sustainability programs. So when you're looking to deeply embed purpose into a business model, you're really talking about harnessing, that full enterprise set of capabilities, talents, and resources to drive impact. So making that shift, helping our employees understand the change. One of the things that we did do was to dissolve our CSR department. So it was quite an intentional step that we took. And we established the social purpose office. And so we work as business partners to the different areas of the business, supporting them to integrate purpose into their operations, into our products, into our HR policies and practices, as an example. And we've been.
What is different? What is really different about it then, and the way that it works?
So it really is that business partner approach, where we're advising and supporting them to think about how purpose is integrated into their area, as opposed to operating on the side of the company, doing the good work through the CSR programs, but sort of not necessarily always integrated or embedded in what the rest of the organization is focused on. This is really about all of us working together as an organization and really collectively striving to advance purpose in meaningful ways.
And maybe we can hear from those businesses today. What's the next step for you? What are you hoping to achieve next? David, maybe you could tell us first.
Sure. So along those lines, we are developing numerous projects, but right now on the cement side, there's really a couple of pieces. We're looking at modernizing one of our plants to be the first net zero plant in Eastern Canada, using a bunch of alternative fuels right now at those plants, looking into alternative cementitious materials to replace cement or portions of cement. We've also put a huge push on using waste right now. As I said, we're right now up to 2.5 million tons of waste that we're using, and we have a goal that by 2030 to be at 6 million tons. Right now I'm in Halifax. We're just visiting one of our projects here, Project Phoenix, where we'll be taking waste from the municipalities to use as alternative fuels at the process to be used as alternative fuels at our cement facility here. So those are some of the big ones, but again, you can see how they're intricately tied to each of those metrics. Each of these pieces, we understand how it moves the metrics and how it makes a difference. One of the other big pushes, though, is really around governance and changing the rules. There's so much we can do right now within the rules as they exist, but part of the key is to collaborate with business and other stakeholders to make the sustainable solution the profitable solution. And a couple of key pieces around that is going to performance-based specs that will allow more innovation to reduce CO2, increase circularity, pushing green procurement, so having a way to measure in a commercialized form some of those key metrics are really some of the key pieces.
Right. Okay. I think we'll come back to what you said, board and performance in a little bit. But Liz, what's next for your organization? You've mentioned tracking DEI measures and your own office, making sure you're sourcing ethically and in a way that matches your social purpose. What are some of the bigger changes you hope to see at your company?
So this year we are measuring our baseline performance as part of the Net Zero Challenge, but also our purpose performance and our performance along social dimensions as well. So that we can establish some goals for improvement. We're very early in the process of embedding purpose, and that's the natural next step to determine how we're performing right now and then establish some targets for improving that performance going forward. And my plan, as we're a small company, is to include everyone in the metric setting. We're only 29 or 30 people. And I think the KPIs and the targets need to be meaningful to people. So after we establish our baseline, we'll move forward to establishing the KPIs. We do plan to link it to executive performance. We have also embedded purpose questions into our performance review so that we can measure engagement and have those important conversations with people about what our purpose means and what they can do to contribute towards it.
Right. And do you see these goals being reflected in the partnerships, where you source your materials for the business, the products that you buy and sell?
Well, yes, the equipment that we provide, it needs to be low or no emission, simply because of the nature of the processes that we're selling into. Leaks and improperly applied equipment can create a lot of environmental harm and can even result in, injuries or fatalities. So we've always been very diligent about making sure that our equipment is of the highest quality. What we're seeing now is that there are new processes and disruptive technologies that are being introduced into the landscape because of the energy transition and the urgency to address emissions. And we are seeing that we're attracting some of these newer technologies to our portfolio. So that's going to be a long-term goal. We are not in a position to do a hard pivot away from our customers and our established suppliers, but we will add to our portfolio and enhance it in a way that allows us to participate more in cleaner processes and technologies.
Okay. And Maureen, I think we'll start taking questions from the audience, and we have one here for you. So you mentioned that Coast Capital is a certified B Corp. Could you tell us what that is and what the difference is between a purpose-driven company and a certified B Corp?
Yeah, so a certified B Corp, it means that essentially we've been examined by an independent third party for all of the different practices that we have against 5 impact areas. So that really focuses in on your broader ESG activity. We have about 300 different metrics that we are reviewed on by B Lab, which is the nonprofit organization that manages B Corp certifications. And so as you can imagine, there's a wide diversity of things that we could be engaged in, from, our equity, diversity, and inclusion practices, to how we are being inclusive through our products and services to our impact on the planet. So the difference about being a social purpose company is that it's really bringing focus to that effort. And that's so important because it's hard to think about, your performance across 300 metrics. Of course, we are always aiming to improve, our practices across everything that we do. But having that focus of a purpose is so important. And it really helps everybody to, think about where it is that we really want to excel and move the needle in terms of impact.
So I'd like to bring Coro back in now. Coro, one thing that several of our panelists have brought up is tying social purpose to board compensation, executive compensation. How do you see that as part of this puzzle?
Yeah, it's an essential piece of the puzzle, Irene, essential. And it's part of rewiring the company to align with its purpose by signaling to employees that they will be rewarded and incentivized, not just for financial performance, but now also for achieving the societal goals that are reflected in the strategy. So it enables a purpose-driven culture and signals the desire to have a purpose-driven culture. And anything less than that is not going to help advance the company on its social purpose. But I would make a little bit, elaborate on that point a little bit more, because you don't go right from having a purpose to incentives. And David spoke to the need for a strategy. I think Christelle did as well. In fact, who hasn't spoken to the need for a strategy? So once you adopt your social purpose, within the next year in your next business plan or your next strategic review, you need to then look for the KPIs and targets and metrics to deliver on your purpose. And now that you have them embedded in your corporate strategy, that's the point by which you can then start to move it into incentives. And not just incentives, but the employee experience overall, the entire employee life cycle from recruitment to retirement, and everything in between needs to reflect your social purpose. And you need to be making sure that your employees are trained on your social purpose, understand what's the difference between a social purpose company and a non-social purpose company so they can start to help activate on it. And it's through these kinds of measures that you'll be able to actually achieve performance on your purpose, but with the targets and metrics to be able to disclose as well. So it's really sort of thinking about incentives is the route by which we can start to really imagine how a social purpose company can bring its purpose to life.
Right. So are you already seeing Canadian companies who have adopted a social purpose tying achievement of these goals, these metrics to their pay?
I think we probably have 3 of 3 businesses here. But yeah, for companies, we are seeing evidence of companies that have a social purpose linking it to pay. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have another question. So for Coro, to what extent do you think the economy overall can become a purpose economy?
Oh, yes. Well, speaking as the chair of the Canadian Purpose Economy Project, thank you for that question. Yeah, so how can we realize that? Well, maybe just to define it for a moment. So the purpose economy is an economy in which a social purpose business and financial and regulatory systems are all aligned to enable long-term well-being for all. So once you have this idea of social purpose in business, you can actually take that pretty well anywhere, this idea of, let's say, the social purpose of anything. So if you think of the social purpose business, why not think about the social purpose of the economy? What is the purpose of the economy? And in the past, we've all inherited the economy we have now. But now the idea is to mobilize social purpose ambassadors and change agents and businesses and allies, all of you listening to the webinar here today, to basically call to businesses, to call to government leaders, to call out to investors, those who are investing our funds, that we would like to see this intentional redesign, the architecture that David was speaking to, of an economy that enables long-term well-being for all within a thriving planet. So we know how to do this reorganization. That's why the Canadian Purpose Economy Project was formed. It's now just an organizing project, and we feel as ambitious and audacious about that as we do about the social purpose that each of us are representing here today.
So a question for Christelle. Can you tell us, Christelle, about the role that the private investment sector has to play in the social purpose economy?
Absolutely. So when looking at the private investment sector, as we know, because traditionally the main focus has truly been about financial returns, their role is really instrumental in creating the capital access for many of these companies to be able to scale and to grow into the next stage. As Liz mentioned earlier, we're seeing this challenge with the newer age, generation taking over some of these businesses, are looking to even manage them or take them over. And so how do we create an economy where investors can really play that role to invest in these companies that are making a shift, but more importantly, also provide some of that seed capital to new ideas and new innovation as well to continue to support the ecosystem. And so we've seen some of the leaders as CDPQ, which is one of the largest pension funds, create some of these products to help shareholders and investors have that opportunity. But I believe that it's not just for impact funds to do this work. We need some of these private investment firms to invest in some of these firms and also in these companies to grow and scale and contribute to this purpose economy that we're all hoping and striving for.
What would you say to those private investment funds, private investors who have concerns that purpose and profit are not necessarily aligned?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key things is that there is evidence that is supporting this more and more, but that we're going to see that shift as shareholders begin to express their demands to have those returns be a part of their portfolio. And so I think the opportunity there is for these investors to reach a wider network of investors and also be at the forefront of how shareholders are now looking to have investments that also align with their values. And so it's really positioning them to be at the forefront and have a more competitive advantage to other typical investment opportunities.
So we only have a few minutes left here, so we'll have one last question from the audience, which is, what role does procurement play in reaching purpose goals? Maybe Maureen, you can speak to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another tremendous opportunity for companies to look at making an impact around purpose, is to think about your strategic supplier relationships that you have. And so we're very intentional about talking to our suppliers about our purpose, what's important to us in terms of finding that values alignment. We hold an annual supplier workshop as an example to help them understand and grow their understanding of what purpose is, but also to understand more about what it is that we're looking for in those relationships. But then even more broadly, thinking about some of the partnerships that we have, how can we collaborate in new ways and really look at the purpose as providing a bit of a new way for us to engage in dialogue with our partners around how to work together in new and different ways to drive impact. So it's another great opportunity.
All right, so many more questions, so many more topics to go into, but we will have to leave it there for today. On behalf of the Globe and Mail, I'd like to thank you all, Christelle, Liz, Maureen, Coro, David. Thank you so much for being here today, and to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was educational and entertaining. And thank you very much also to Coast Capital for supporting today's event. We will be sharing a link to the recorded webcast in about a week if you want to rewatch anything today. So again, thank you very much.